We thought we should not let this show pass without having a bit of a dialogue about the works that are in the show and some of the things going on within figurative painting. My name is Nicole Slatter. A lot of you know me from Curtin and have been bombarded with the invitation through Blackboard, so thanks for coming. We're here with the organiser, curator of the show, Kevin Robertson, and we also have Thomas Hoareau, who is going to talk about his work in a roundabout way. We've got some questions for him. But before I do that, ask questions of Thomas, I'm going to hand over to Kevin, who's going to talk a little bit about the show, how it came together, and the ideas that brought this show here.
Hey, thanks, Nicole. The show, I started in discussion with Thelma John about 2 years ago, the idea of doing a figurative show at the gallery, and she responded to the idea really well. And so then we started looking around. I suggested most of the artists. I'm always surveying the field, and from working in an art gallery, lots of catalogues come in from all over Australia. I think, that person's interesting. Suddenly I had this opportunity to actually invite these people and say, let's put this together. It comes from a kind of a core of figurative art in Perth, and there are a few precedents for this show. There's Presence at the Fremantle Arts Centre. Bernadette Pittman curated that. Then Oddfellows, curated by Sandra Murray, and then I did a show in 2005 called Configured. And so they all feed into this show in terms of the way it's framed and the kind of artists that are in it. But I thought it'd be interesting to do this in a national context, and to some degree it's turned out to be a slightly international context. So I thought, a lot of artists I had met when I went to art school in Sydney, like Stuart McFarlane and Nurissa Lee, who both show at Australian galleries, and it was interesting to see the connections with the scene here. And I thought this is going to be fantastic to put all these people together. And there are a lot of people omitted, a lot of really interesting Perth artists and artists around the host, but that's just the toughness of the curatorial process, unfortunately. I thought it was a good survey and a good balance of different aspects of figurative art, and that's basically it, I think.
Now, one of the things that I was talking to Thomas on the opening night of the show, and I had a lot of questions about his paintings. And I guess the idea of putting a floor talk together, sometimes it runs in the way that an artist stands up and tells you all the things that they're thinking. This is a little bit different, I guess. I have some questions that I had of the work, and I thought from a teaching perspective that some of my students would also be interested in that. I think one of the best evaluations of the class that I've just taught in third year painting was to do with going and having a look at the Ben Quilty show and talking about the painting in front of the painting, which is a rare opportunity and one I think not to be missed. A lot of the people were looking at the work of the artists online and saying, I don't know about that, I don't like that. When you get here in the space, the paintings really come to life, and I think in every sense a good painting is much better in the flesh, and it's important to get in front of it. So to begin with, I'm going to ask Thomas to talk about his work, and this work, what's the title of this work?
This painting is called An Antiquity in Gavin. That's what it's called, and that's the key into it. So because I have been kind of obsessed with this idea of Australia as the antipodes to Europe. That is the work, I kind of came about through looking actually at the word Antipodean, because the Antipodean art movement. Does anyone know the Antipodean art movement? It's sort of like Charles Blackman and
they had a very hardcore manifesto, anti-abstraction.
Bernard Smith. But I'm kind of interested in where the name comes from too, and that's antipodes means when you have a point on the globe, A, you draw through the centre of the globe to B, the centre, and then C to where it ends up on the other end. And Australia was always considered that kind of an Antipodean kind of journey for Europe. And it's sort of like so we always kind of considered the underside of the world, or as Paul Keating said, the arse end of the world, when he was waiting to succeed Bob Hawke, and he was saying, I'm not going to wait around in the arse end of the world. So I kind of was kind of like looking at that perception of, and what does that, and so that's... So
I didn't ask you a quick question about that, but I guess it leads to notions of symbolism within the painting. So you use the title, as you say, as a key in to some of the ideas.
Yeah.
But can you talk a little bit about also the sorts of symbolism that you use in this work?
Well, this work, in relation to the title and the symbolism, this is actually an actual location. This here is actually a place on the Swan River, so it's actually no different to a lot of the other work I've done, and I tend to work with actual locations. And in the past, people have said, oh, he's had this homicide effect because he has very familiar locations. So that is, Homicide was a series on TV, and a reviewer had said I had this homicide effect. It was actually Ted Snell, it was a long time ago now, but he actually said that I had this homicide effect, that people are normally accustomed to seeing sort of famous cities and stuff, but instead they see something very familiar. But I mean, this is very familiar to me. This is what I call my kind of bush piata. It's a tree lying in the arms of another tree, and I was always been kind of fascinated with this, which is just down the road from where I live in Vivash. So, and I was quite interested in the reflections, because and again, this kind of relates to antiquities, the underside of the world, because the tendency for how we engage with the landscape, it's very much in appearances. That is, we don't attribute a lot of cultural meaning, in terms of, we don't penetrate the landscape in terms of in a kind of religious way, or in a kind of indigenous way. We penetrate it, we sort of rely on the appearances of it. So it's almost like the kind of reflections kind of echo that perception of how we want to sort of somehow engage in the landscape, but we can't sort of penetrate it. And it also relates to that sort of idea of the underside of the world. And you can see actually in the reflection, I know people would say, oh, I know, is that what there's a plane, and it's sort of, so we have been in those sort of flight. So I think a lot about them. So these things, look, and so it's like this plane's come back from who knows where, probably Bali or Europe or something. So it's like the underside. Again, it relates to Europe and the underside of the world. It sort of continues that whole thing I have done with the case of deja vu.
This extends out of that question. The notion of art references, do you respond to historical painting or art? Do you have that in mind when you're thinking about the history of painting water and reflection and, what other...
I suppose I couldn't help but think about, you think about Monet and George Haynes and things like that. But in reality, it wasn't really a big issue, except I do think about, how art can exist in the everyday. Like here we are having a little talk about art, but then we have to do all these other everyday issues like wash dishes and serve other people and things. And I think about how art can exist in the everyday a lot, and I suppose, and how it exists in European history, how we bring significance to it. I mean, these are the things oil painting and whether where it exists as an activity, in terms of significance, in terms of everything else. I mean, I suppose every 10 years or so you sort of have to think about these things to try to renew your practice as an artist in some ways, and so that's the kind of thing. But
I was going to say, an interesting